It's Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. Trump says Obama has some splainin to do. No troons in the Olympics as far as the United States is concerned. And grading the second Trump administration 6 months in. Next on the AM Update. President Trump says that he has struck a deal with Japan, a trade deal. He says it's the largest deal ever with Japan that involves special reciprocal tariffs of 15% on the country's exports into the United States. In a post on Truth Social, Trump also said that Japan will invest over $500 billion into the United States, adding that the United States will receive about 90% of the profits. Here he is at the White House yesterday evening.
And I said to the Japanese trade representatives, and these were the top people, we concluded the one deal, Doug, and now we're going to conclude another one because they're forming a joint venture with us in Alaska, as you know, for the LNG. So I said we'll all do that together with Chris. Is Chris here? I don't know. Chris, right? If you could set that up, Doug, it would be great. But they're all set to make that deal now, so I think it's good. This was really the one they had to make, and we're going to make a deal with Japan on the LNG in Alaska, right?
Also announced yesterday at the White House, Trump says they've struck a deal with the Philippines. He welcomed their head of state to the White House, said it was a beautiful meeting, said the United States will have full access to the Philippine market, will pay zero tariffs, but the Philippines will pay a 19% tariff, down from the 20% tariff that they were paying. While that meeting was taking place, Trump fielded questions from reporters, and he lashed out at Fed Chair Jerome Powell. By the way, there was a phony report, a phony resignation letter going around from Jerome Powell yesterday. Nevertheless, Trump is still very hopeful that he'll resign sooner than later.
I think he's doing a bad job, but he's going to be out pretty soon anyway. In eight months, he'll be out. But I call him too late. He's too late all the time. He should have lowered interest rates many times. Europe lowered their rate 10 times. We lowered ours none. And it's causing a problem for people that want to buy a home. Look, our economy is so strong now, we're blowing through everything. We're setting records. You know that. You see that. And whether it's the Philippines or anyone else, we're setting records at levels that nobody's ever seen before. But you know what? People aren't able to buy a house because this guy is a numbskull. He keeps the rates too high. And probably doing it for political reasons. Yep.
During that same meeting, President Trump reacted to the continued developments about Barack Obama, his administration, and the collusion that they allegedly did with the Hillary Clinton campaign to promulgate the Russia collusion hoax.
It would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him. And Comey was there. And Clapper. The whole group was there. Brennan. They were all there in a room. Right here. This was the room. This is much more beautiful than it was then, but that's okay. I have nice pictures up. They came out of the vaults. They were in there for 100 years. This is much more beautiful. We have the Declaration of Independence now in the room, which wasn't here. I guess people didn't feel too good about putting it here, but I do. But you know what? If you look at those papers, they have them stone cold, and it was President Obama. It wasn't lots of people all over the place. It was them too. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? And except for the fact that he gets shielded by the press for his entire life, that's the one look, he's guilty. It's not a question. You know, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason.
So there you have it. President Trump says, and he's accusing former President Obama of treason for allegedly colluding with the Hillary Clinton campaign to formulate and then propagate the Russia collusion hoax. Of course, you heard yesterday, Attorney General Pam Bondi made the announcement on behalf of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. He's willing to have the FBI and the DOJ meet with Ghislaine Maxwell. That would be a close confidant of Jeffrey Epstein. Well, after that news took place, the U.S. House of Representatives and the Oversight Committee will seek to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell for testimony about the Jeffrey Epstein case. Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee had requested Chairman James Comer summon the imprisoned British socialite for testimony in front of that panel. He said in a statement, quote, "Since Miss Maxwell is in federal prison, the committee will work with the Department of Justice and Bureau of Prisons to identify a date when the committee can depose her." Despite demands from lawmakers of both parties, House GOP leadership has so far stymied efforts to compel the release of additional information about the convicted pedophile who was found dead in his Manhattan jail cell back in 2019. Well, the Department of Justice has fired the top prosecutor in the District of New Jersey after she was chosen by judges over Trump pick Alina Habba. Habba's 120-day term is set to expire this week, giving the judges the authority to either vote to extend her term or choose a new U.S. attorney. The bench of judges in New Jersey, most of whom were appointed by Democratic presidents, revealed Tuesday they had voted to replace Habba with Desiree Grace, a career prosecutor and Habba's top assistant. But in a twist, the Department of Justice quickly decided to fire Grace, leaving open the question of who would fill the role. Attorney General Pam Bondi said Grace's firing should signal that the DOJ does not tolerate rogue judges, especially when they threaten President Trump's core Article 2 powers. Well, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee will comply with President Trump's ban on dudes who feel pretty from competing in women's sports. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee updated its policies yesterday to say it would comply with the president's executive order. The committee made the change in an updated athlete safety policy posted to their website earlier this week, which does not mention the word transgender in any of its 27 pages. But the document does include language that implies that the so-called transgender women, dudes who feel pretty, will no longer be able to compete in women's divisions. It says, quote, the USOPC, that would be the U.S. Olympic or Paralympic Committee, will continue to collaborate with various stakeholders with oversight responsibilities to ensure that women have a fair and safe competition environment consistent with Executive Order 14201 and the Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act. Executive Order, otherwise known as Trump's No Men in Women's Sports Order. It's unclear whether any Olympians would be banned from competition for the 2028 Olympics under the updated policy. I can't remember if we had any high-level Olympic athletes that would have, in recent years, actually been affected by this new move, but nevertheless, it's a good move in the right direction. Well, here is Democrat Representative Yvette Clark. She is of New York, saying the other quiet part out loud about illegal immigration. What is the other part out loud? Well, one part out loud is that we need illegal aliens to come pick our cotton or pick our crops. That's the chattel, basically a new form of modern day slavery. That's one of the quiet parts they don't like to say out loud. What Yvette Clark says is the other quiet part.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York. We have a diaspora that can absorb a significant number of these migrants. And when I hear colleagues talk about, the doors of the inn being closed, no room in the inn, I'm saying, I need more people in my district, but just for redistricting purposes. And those members could clearly.
There it is. They don't like to say that out loud. It's been known. It's not a secret, but they hardly ever say this out loud. Yeah, illegal aliens are indeed counted as part of the U.S. Census. And why is that important? Well, the U.S. Census dictates how many congressional districts states get and their apportionment. And that's one of the reasons why Democrats love illegal immigration. It helps them out. Even if illegal aliens, wink, wink, don't get to vote, they do matter for districting. Here is actor Jeff Daniels of Dumb and Dumber fame talking about an alternative history where Kamala Harris is now president.
I still think about Kamala and how I think she would have been a good choice. I don't care what they say, because she would have done what Lincoln did. Liz Cheney would have been Secretary of State.
Team of Rivals.
Yeah, Team of Rivals. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote the book about it. That's what Lincoln did. Surrounded himself with the people who would disagree with him, not the people who would, take a knee and go, yeah, more tariffs, sir, more. It's the madness of King George. And just the deterioration of the Republican Party. I mean, look, I'm just an actor. What do I know?
Exactly.
But when Mitch started stacking the courts 25 years ago, I said it on your show once. They can see it coming.
Actor Jeff Daniels of Dumb and Dumber fame saying that if Kamala Harris were elected president, she would basically be a modern-day Abraham Lincoln. No doubt I can hear it rattling around in my ears right now. 407 vodkas ago, I fell out of a coconut tree. Yeah, you could totally hear Kamala Harris doing an Abraham Lincoln. When we come back, I think Ozzy Osbourne was a little more enigmatic than maybe he might be thought of in a lot of circles. Also, Coca-Cola making a big change. We'll tell you about that coming up next. The final performance of Ozzy Osbourne just took place days ago in his hometown of Birmingham, United Kingdom. Mama, I'm Coming Home. The former Black Sabbath lead man passed away yesterday at the age of 76. Ozzy Osbourne had an image, a brand about him that was very evocative and very occultish. In fact, he's kind of winked and nodded at that, or overtly done so over the years, but I think he's a little bit more complicated than that. I think it was about, I think it was less than a decade ago, 2017, he and his son visited the Ark Encounter in Kentucky for a TV show that they were filming. Less than a decade ago, I think it was in 2015, he did an interview where he said he believes in God, but he doesn't go to church. Back in the 80s, he said he was a Christian. But yet this entire career, his brand has been very, let's just call it goth / occultish. Yet at the same time, he was married to Sharon for over 40 years. In the entertainment world, that's like 10 different marriages. 40 years to the same wife. I don't know. There's just something about me that says he's a little bit more complicated than just a countercultural kind of stained glass window smasher that he's been made out to be in a lot of circles. At least Christian circles just kind of viewed him as that. And I'll just say this as well. He released a song, I think it was with Elton John back in 2020, called Ordinary Man. And it's a fantastic song. It's a ballad. And if you watch the music video, it's very touching. It's very touching. He sits down in his theater and just starts playing clips of his career. And I believe the chorus goes, I don't want to die an ordinary man. I've seen this, I've seen that. I don't want to die an ordinary man. But at the very end of the music video, he's just an ordinary man. And he and Sharon are just being sweet to each other. And I think if I'm interpreting that correctly, what he's saying in that song, what he's saying in the music video is that I've done all of this, I've done all of that. I don't want to die an ordinary man, but at the end, he's happy being an ordinary man. I don't know. I just think he's a little bit more complicated than how he has sometimes been pigeonholed. Well, how about this? The Coca-Cola company said Tuesday it's going to launch a version of its signature drink made with American cane sugar. The announcement comes days after President Trump posted on Truth Social that he'd been speaking to Coca-Cola about using real cane sugar in Coke in the United States. Initially, Coca-Cola did not confirm the news. The company told NBC News and other outlets that it appreciated Trump's enthusiasm for the Coca-Cola brand, and more details will be shared soon. But the company said in its earnings released on Tuesday morning that a version of the drink with cane sugar was indeed coming later this year. Quote, as part of its ongoing innovation agenda, this fall in the United States, the company plans to launch an offering made with U.S. cane sugar to expand its trademark Coca-Cola product range. Coca-Cola produced for the U.S. market is typically sweetened with corn syrup, which is terrible for you. All sugar is bad for you, but corn syrup especially so. The company uses cane sugar in some other countries, including Mexico and various European countries. I don't think I've ever had pure cane sugar Coca-Cola. I have heard from people who have drank it in Mexico and other areas where it's available, and they say the taste is indeed markedly different. Well, thoughts and prayers to you if you are a SIG Sauer enjoyer. The U.S. Air Force has launched an investigation into the SIG Sauer M18 after a desk sergeant placed his holstered pistol on a table where it discharged and fatally struck him in the chest. It's prompting the Air Force Global Strike Command to pause all M18 use. What a tragic story. Just setting down his service pistol. And we don't know the identity. The Air Force has not identified the individual who was killed by this faulty SIG Sauer M18. Just putting it down, probably taking a break. You expect your gun to, be able to not just go off randomly. And now the U.S. Air Force has issued a memo telling all Strike Command personnel to cease use of the M18. I've heard in the civilian versions of some of their pistols that the same thing has happened as well. So thoughts and prayers if you are a SIG Sauer enjoyer. And now here's this. I saw Chris Rufo post this yesterday, and I kind of want to read it as an introduction to Air Analysis Today. This is an excerpt from Richard Nixon's book, In the Arena, where he describes his view of the 60s. This is Richard Nixon in the Arena talking about the 1960s. Quote, in the 60s, schools became a social and cultural wasteland. In college, curricular decisions were held hostage to student demonstrators who thought they knew better than teachers and the administrators what and how young people should learn. In high school, educators and students seemed to spend more time arguing about smoking areas, hair length, and hemlines than they did about teaching and learning. In elementary school, students became guinea pigs for the latest theoretical crazes imported from Washington. In the confusion, the fundamental mission of education was lost. Before the 60s, the job of education was to help students become productive members of society. Good schooling was prepared for them for the responsibilities of having jobs and families. But during the 60s, the very idea of having jobs and families was judged to be hopelessly banal, even corrupt. It became the job of education to mold students into culturally and politically correct citizens of some ideal world that existed only in the brain of the ideologue or theoretician. It became racist to teach Shakespeare to Hispanic children, racist to teach traditional English to inner-city black children, racist not to teach white children Latin American literature, or not to teach non-English speaking children in their own language. Competition was ruled to be dangerous, so grades were tossed out at many colleges to be replaced by pass or fail, and competitive sports were frowned upon. Standard tests were judged to be racist, sexist, or both. That is an excerpt of Richard Nixon in his book, In the Arena, describing his view of the 1960s. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. First thing is, Richard Nixon did nothing wrong. I've just become thoroughly convinced of that now. I first heard the idea that Richard Nixon was maybe misjudged probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now, when you take it into the totality of what we have seen Washington, D.C. become, especially with the way that they have treated President Trump and all of the hoaxes that they have tried to pull on him, most notably, just in the news today, what the deep state has tried to do with him, the parallels between Richard Nixon, populist, winging conservative, and Donald Trump, populist, some conservative instincts, the parallels between those two figures are incredible. So there's that. I think I really just believe Richard Nixon has been, he was railroaded. He was railroaded upon further review. Secondly, what does this have to do with grading the Trump administration? Everything. The linchpin of a dysfunctional society is always going to be in education. Now, what do I mean by functional? Okay, I don't mean the secularization. Ultimately, your spiritual health is always going to be indicative or predictive of societal success at large. That's always going to be the case. But I'm just talking about, can we have literate people? And I don't just mean people who can read or write, people who understand financial literacy, people who understand how to fix things, how to have jobs, how to have families, people who have marketable skills. That's what I mean by functional. The linchpin of a dysfunctional society is dysfunctional education. And this is Richard Nixon. What you just heard, Richard Nixon was describing the 1960s, which was 60 plus years ago now. A lot of water under the bridge. In fact, the water for some of the intervening time has come over the bridge. And so I think you need to take that perspective, especially during this, most recent time, especially when it comes to the disappointment with the DOJ, FBI, Epstein, how that's been messaged, how that's been handled. I think it's really important to reset the big picture here. Just what Trump and his administration is up against. It's a fundamental dysfunctional society. Linchpin, of course, is education, and President Trump is trying to deal with that, among other issues. So taken from a 10,000-foot view, how would I grade the Trump presidency so far? I'd grade it an A. I really would. And I'm talking about the second Trump administration so far. 6 months in. I would grade it an A. The only thing keeping it from being an A+, and maybe I should go a lower grade, is the Department of Justice, the FBI. That has just been a major black eye. A major black eye. You know what? I'm kind of talking myself into an A- or B+ now that I'm talking about this out loud. So B+ at worst, A at best, very best. It's kind of like if you take the SAT or ACT, and you're really, really good at English, you're really, really good at science, biology. I don't know if that's the subject. It's been a long time since I've taken the ACT. But you're really good at everything except for like one segment of like algebra or something like that. And that just brings down your entire score. That's kind of what the DOJ is. And what's so inexplicable and unexplainable is why it's been taking so long to like get any action. I mean, this Obama stuff with the Russia collusion narrative, it's a good start, but all it is so far is just a start. What's so frustrating about this is there's no real good answer why it's taking so long to get any information about holding people accountable for their crimes. There's tons of prima facie evidence, and I know prima facie is just prima facie. It's not real hard evidence. But you would have thought maybe I need some better education. You would have thought by now we would have gotten somebody in handcuffs. Okay, make fun of Alina Habba all you want. She's one of the only people in Trump's administration, in Trump's circle, to put somebody in handcuffs. First, it was the Newark mayor, and then it was the congresswoman from New Jersey. She's one of the only people to put an elected official in handcuffs, and that was for disrupting that ICE detention facility. But that has been the biggest black eye or bruise on the second Trump administration so far. The glacial pace the Department of Justice and all of its tentacles have been up to in terms of holding people from the previous administrations accountable for their actions, holding out hope that they can reverse course and right the ship. This is the topic of this week's poll of the week. You can find that over at Real AM Update on X. Look for the pinned post. I gave you 4 options, and yes, intentionally, they are polarizing. So if you don't really want to go for any of the options that I gave you, you can comment. Go vote at Real AM Update on X in the poll of the week. That's going to do it for Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.